I remember, it must be 20, 25 years ago, hearing a talk given by Nick Negroponte of the MIT Media Lab, in which he made a prediction which seemed logically inevitable, but still impossibly far off. And he said, everything that today goes through wires will go through the air, and everything that goes through the air today will go through wires. And yet here we are at that moment of transition where mobility, and the point was that mobility was going to drive this change. Mobility is the future. It's clear that the web as we knew it is going mobile, but more than that, whole new classes of applications. And a lot of complaints that, oh my God, it's not working as well as we think it is, and people forget just how much bloody magic it is. This is working at all. And I just want to think about the size of the problem. Can you kind of give us some sense of where we've come from, where we're going? What happens when smartphones outnumber feature phones? That's already true for you guys.
Yeah,
right?
It's already true for us.
But it's not true for other carriers. What happens when Netflix streaming at prime time is twice or 10 times what it is now? What's it going to take to really build that world? And how far are you from keeping up?
Well, it's funny you should mention that the Negroponte switch, I think it was called, and I spent a lot of time over the last decade. I think about that a lot, about how fast how rapidly that transition is underway. But it's exciting and interesting at the same time to watch it unfold. And so when you look at it, you'd say, what's the appetite for mobile bandwidth? At this point, it's an insatiable appetite. And I think it's a combination of not only a network that's always on and available with enough broadband, it's enough processor power you're carrying with it, and then really importantly is just the software transformation in the ecosystem. We have so shortened the distance between intention and action that, I can be in New York City and a don't walk sign pops up. I have 8 stockbrokers that are addicted to looking at their stock quotes, and all of a sudden you get a huge network demand. Sign changes, close the app, walk across the street, and it disappears. And so we see it all kinds of ways. We see it that the more signal you get in buildings, the more consumption. People would stay on their couch and consume a mobile device rather than get up and walk over 15 or 20 feet to a wired computer that might have more processor and a bigger screen and more resolution. So, I think we're in transition from moving things to enable more mobility to where it's become a companion device. We carry a T1 in our pocket, and very soon we'll be carrying a DS3 in our pocket and a whole entire mobile compute platform.
And just can you give a sense of the scale? How fast are you having to move to keep up with that?
Well, a lot of people like to focus on just the mobile dimension of our network. However you look at our backbone is growing at 40+% a year. The wired broadband network for consumers is growing at 30% a year. The consumption over the last 3 years in mobility is 30x. And, we're delighted to advise that the rate of growth has slowed from 50x to 39x to 30x over the last 3 quarters, but that's just the law of large numbers. Our growth last quarter was, just the growth was bigger than our entire network in the fourth quarter of 2008. So no matter how you dimensionalize it, it's an extraordinary growth rate. I mentioned to you out in the hallway that we have venues that from the beginning of this baseball season to the end of the baseball season that had consumption grow 400%, 500%, 600% during the season.
Yeah, that was actually in response. I asked Twitter for questions, and everybody was like, why is reception so bad at Pac Bell Park? And the answer is, well, there's a freaking lot of people trying to use the network during games instead of paying attention to the action, I suppose. So, data. A lot of this world that we're moving into is vast amounts of data moving through the pipes. What's the ratio of data to voice today?
Oh, well, if you look on a usage basis, it's going to vary throughout the day, but at this point, I don't do much network planning around the capacity that voice is going to take. Voice is very challenging because of the latency requirements in the network, but when you look at dimensioning the network, the scale items, it's predominantly around data, and the fastest growing categories within data are all video related, whether that's streaming video, whether that's app initiated video. That's the big deal on the network these days.
Right. So, and video, obviously, I would imagine there's huge peaks and valleys in the usage. You know, I hear the stories of Netflix at TV primetime being a huge percentage. Can you talk to us about what kinds of applications are the biggest network stressors? And
well, I mean, poorly written ones, generally.
Anybody you want to single out and say, hey, please rewrite your app?
Today's not a day for accolades or singling out poor development. I do think, though, that when you have a high degree of network awareness, that you understand how networks work, you're going to write better applications that are better for the user experience. And so, you know, having an ability of a video-enabled application or a streaming audio or any type of rich media application where you have, you know, a sophisticated way to understand how best to deliver that during, you know, busy hours is always going to be a beneficial thing to the user and to the network.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about net neutrality. You know, this relates to what kinds of apps are stressing the network. Yesterday, when we talked with Eric Schmidt, he pointed out that there's really two ways to think about net neutrality, and one is that you think about you know, classes of traffic, for example, video, voice, other types of data, versus a lot of people naively think, well, we're talking about discrimination about sources of traffic, i.e., you know, we're going to discriminate against you know, a potential competitor who wants to offer, say, video through this channel, and my gosh, we want to have them come over our cable network, for example. How do you think about it when you know, engage in discussions, whether with the government, with competitors? How should we be thinking about net neutrality?
Well, I think that,
or the opposite.
Yeah. Well, I think that you know, we're all for an open internet and having availability, but you know, the different technologies have different requirements to ensure that everyone has a similar and available experience. And so, you know, the nature of networks are different. A mobile network it's shared down to the subscriber level. So you sitting next to me doing things can affect my experience. And so it's a little bit
we see that at conferences. We ask people, hey, don't download videos while you're here. Yeah, exactly. So, but still, I guess I have to say, you know, this idea of the open internet versus the ability to discriminate. How do you think about it at that level of, okay, it's really about classes of traffic, or is it really about classes of partner or competitor?
Well, if you start with the network management, the first thing you have to deal with is the safety of the network. So, you know, we have to keep visibility in our wired, wireless network, nefarious applications that don't have anything to do with who's first or second in line or how fast a packet gets delivered, but it's just about the safety of the network. So we have to have, you know, the privacy and security and the safety in consideration, and then, you know, we want to build the capacity that will afford us the ability to deliver from any source, any destination. So we don't sit and try to play a policer in this activity whatsoever. We are all for an open internet, but when we find a situation where we have an individual's or an experience that's severely compromised by an individual or an application, we want the ability to be able to manage the network, because there's just not enough capital in the world to build to a peak demand of congestion for every and all consideration. So you know, a network is an investment, and you need to manage that appropriately.
So let me ask a very different question. One of the themes of this, or the theme of this event, is points of control. And clearly today we have some new players in the handset scene. iPhone and Android in particular, where they have a lot of irons in the fire, and they have a lot of consumer touch points. And increasingly, you guys are behind a software wall that is constructed by someone else. And I think of a couple of areas. Yesterday, Eric Schmidt showed us near-field communications in an upcoming Android phone. And you look at the implications of that, for example, for payment. And you start thinking, well, who actually captures that customer interaction? In the old days, you really thought, oh, yeah, the carrier is the one. They've got my, my phone number, my identity, my billing, my they keep my my address book, my contacts. And now increasingly you have this other player who's between you and the consumer, in getting information about what they're doing with the phone. Are you guys getting marginalized by that? Or how do you share data back and forth? What's visible to you? What's visible to them? How do you draw those lines?
Well, I think the only exclusive relationship I have is with my family. So I'm sure a lot of people would characterize that they own me as a customer, and I just don't think that way, that it's about, exclusivity of ownership. I think we're headed to a world where it's foreground and background, and we have to have a user experience that's foreground for people that want it that way and linked to things that are going to operate in the background. And then there are going to be customers that prefer someone else's foreground, and we have to link in as a background kind of service. So
it's clear that, for example, on Android phones, one of the things that making Android look more fragmented are the carriers who are coming in and saying, well, we're going to put our skin and some of our required applications and some of our required features on this phone because they're trying to get back in front of the consumer and in front of the raw experience. So clearly that matters to you guys. I mean, to have some...
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of... There are versions of relationships you could call, billing and a long legacy of, rendering, bills and having accuracy and having, customer care in the back end, and if all else goes wrong, someone to call. Is that a better or worse entitlement to the sort of customer experience? Well, some people don't value any of that. Some people would prefer to get, an electronic bill and go online and self-service. And there's a whole bunch of other folks who would have a preference that I like having a number to call if I'm going to send someone, $50 or $70 or $80 a month. And so I don't think that there's a characterization that says this is the point of disintermediation. I think you have now several healthy operating systems. You have a very competitive landscape in the wireless side, and I think it shapes up with the new world of software and web enablement of the mobile environment. I think it shapes up very well to provide a lot of people a very big opportunity. It's a big space.
So what do you think about, Eric literally said yesterday he thought that the phone would potentially replace the credit card within the reasonably foreseeable future.
You folks were probably all here, but this morning we announced that we, in conjunction with T-Mobile and Verizon, were launching a mobile wallet under the name of ISIS that will be across those three companies to provide more than just a payment capability, but entirely a mobile wallet, which would include not only payment but everything else you carry around in your wallet, loyalty programs and so on. And we thought it was important enough, an opportunity, and we thought it was important enough to get scale that we did it in conjunction with a couple of the other large carriers in the United States.
So how are you, this payment, when you go out there and you are charging for phone usage or data usage, you have some sense of the range of what people are going to be charging you with. When you have a credit card, for example, making a purchase, you tend to have a credit limit. You have, or in the case of someone like American Express, you're actually literally underwriting on every transaction, saying, whoa, this is expected, unexpected. Do you guys have the capabilities to really do payment at that level when people start buying? Suddenly somebody tries to put a $50,000 charge on their phone? or a $5,000 charge?
Well, in our model, the credit's going to be handled by the bank, the issuing bank. So,
okay, so
yeah,
you are partnering.
We are partnering.
So that's not really you guys acting as a
right. We're not acting as the
yeah.
entire ecosystem.
Okay.
You know, we're building it up so that we have consistency and standards that allow for retailers and issuing card banks to participate.
Let me ask you another question. This is something that has always bothered me. It seems to me that you guys, you guys meaning the carriers, in my particular case, I do use AT&T, you know a lot about who my friends are. You know, I call people. I laugh because on my Android phone, I have the Facebook app, and it populates my address book with faces. And I go, wow, here are people who are on my favorites list who aren't on Facebook. You know, and yet you guys could potentially have a social play. Should potentially be partnering more deeply with someone like Facebook. How do you think about social? How do you guys think about social?
Well, I think that we're probably the oldest social service in the world. If you think about the evolution of where we are today, we spent the better part of 80 years with the primary way with which we were social, if we weren't sitting across from each other, is picking up the phone and generating a voice call, and with that carries a lot of experience about relationships.
But you haven't actually though presented that in new ways to the customer. You know, where you're not integrating with the other ways that they're social. Shouldn't you be more actively integrating with this new social media?
We're evaluating the opportunities in there. I think that there are certainly we need to be in alignment with the regulatory requirements in that regard, but we do have a big opportunity with available information. But I think job one for us is to ensure that we protect privacy. So,
okay, I want to go one very different direction, and this refers to the storied heritage of your name. I had a conversation recently with a senior researcher at a major internet company who made to me an absolutely flabbergasting statement. He was talking about how much he loved having the research division of this company be actively involved in developing products and having an impact on product development. And he made a reference to, he said, these old research departments that kind of satellites to the main company and don't necessarily impact its business. And he made this absolutely stupefying statement to me. He said, "What did AT&T ever get out of Bell Labs?" And I of course, having grown up with Unix and the internet, I thought, oh my gosh, you're living in the world that Bell Labs built, the transistor thing, How do you think about basic research? Do you guys still do it?
Oh yeah,
should
absolutely.
You still be doing it? Should companies be doing it?
It's disheartening and a little disappointing for me in that the labs reports into me that someone would carry that opinion. It just means I'm not doing my job effectively enough in communicating it. We have AT&T labs today, 1,100 of the world's top scientists that do primary research, and we're one of the few companies in America that remains committed to primary research. And the way you differentiate primary research from research and development, which is so prevalent within traditional business today, is you hire into competencies. And you don't tell people what to do, you hire into competencies, and the problems emerge and they cluster in teams to go solve those problems. So we have experts in the field of large database management, speech recognition, the mathematics of recommender engines, and they get together and solve a problem. So if you look at fraud today, in the last 10 years, our labs has made fraud almost non-existent in networks, in that if you set out to commit fraud on our network, and you could show up in another city with another name and a different device and a different account, we can normally find you within 4 hours. So, we solve extraordinary problems. It's a great legacy. We have, 8 Nobel Prizes. I learned you can't spend Nobel Prizes. So you do have to get, a good linkage of an innovation engine behind that, and we've been very focused on leveraging those 1,100 people And if you look at the transformation during my tenure at AT&T, it's been a lot about getting the labs really connected up into the top problems that the company has and the industry as a whole has.
All right, well, I think we're out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.